Okay, now we should be live. Check 1 2, check 1 2, testing, testing. I started the stream and it was private. I was wondering why nobody was watching, but there we go. We got it fixed. It should be a great stream tonight. It's going to be a pretty short one. I don't have that many clips, but the topic is great. And, I know the last few have been, some marathons we've done lately, and I'm trying to start them earlier. As I've said many times before, I should stop saying it, but it is constantly true. And I'm also going to try and keep them to be a bit shorter. 3 hours is plenty. 5.5 hours is too long. So, but please hit the like button. It really helps, fuel the algorithm and boost this content if you find it valuable. And please comment any questions that you have in the live chat. Looking and sounding great. Good. Thank you. Paulina, my wife, my wonderful wife, is my sound check person every week. But tonight we're going to be talking about a stream, well, not a stream, just a short video that Bernardo Kastrup put up on his Scientia Foundation YouTube channel on the universal consciousness and what its properties are, what his thoughts are on it as it relates to his theory of analytic idealism, and how that compares to sentient singularity theories, conceptualization of God or sentient existence. And before we do that, though, you should check the link some point after the stream. In the description, I gave a talk remotely at Florida Atlantic University at the Gruber AI Sandbox over the weekend, basically introducing sentient singularity theory. It's just an intro. We are very limited on time, so it wasn't nearly as in-depth as I would have wanted, but it's, beginning of more formal talks and videos about sentient singularity theory. And, hopefully everyone from here on is even better than that. Definitely subscribe to the Ekkolapto channel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm pretty sure I am, but it's just not a common word. But I really, that was Addy's channel, and he put on that talk. He's put on many great talks with, and some incredible thinkers, Michael Levin and Stephen Wolfram and many others. And I highly suggest subscribing to his YouTube channel and checking out his other videos, not just mine. But let me know, what you think of that intro, if it's concise, if it helps you at all with your understanding of sentient singularity theory. If you do understand sentient singularity theory, definitely let me know what you think of that video. And like I said, I know there's a lot that is missing from it because we were pretty short on time, but I will be releasing some pre-produced videos shortly about sentient singularity theory. We did do a stream last week that was, just kind of a practice run, and I learned a lot from it, I will say, about how to present. And I don't know if for any of you that weren't on that, I was not sure if I was going to present it from a first-person perspective of how I developed it and my journey, or whether or not I was going to give kind of a third-person objective, description and explanation of sentient singularity theory that just kind of goes in this logical order of model building, I guess you could say. And I opted for the second one. Definitely thanks to the practice run that was quite necessary last week. So I appreciate everybody that joined for that. It was very helpful to me. So here, this is the, by the way, this is the Ekkolapto channel. This is my video that I was talking about. Definitely check out Addy's channel, though. It's very, very good. He's quite a video editor. So this is the stream that we're going to be, or the video that we're going to be looking at, though. It is on the Scientia Foundation YouTube channel. It is linked below if you want to watch the whole thing. And it's just titled Universal Consciousness, Dr. Bernardo Kastrup. And if you are, familiar with the channel or the type of topics that we talk about, then you're definitely familiar with Bernardo Kastrup. Here, do a brief intro, even though I've definitely done intros and given his background before and streams about his work multiple times at this point. But he is a Brazilian Dutch philosopher and computer scientist, best known for his work in the field of consciousness studies, particularly his development of analytic idealism, a form of metaphysical idealism grounded in the analytic philosophical tradition, a broad movement within Western philosophy, especially focused on analysis as a philosophical method. It is characterized by a clarity of prose, rigor in arguments, and making use of formal logic and mathematics. To a lesser degree, let's see, the natural sciences. It's not the best explanation of what makes this specific. I feel like most, other than, maybe that, but I feel like most philosophical, endeavors aim for that. But metaphysical idealism is, or philosophical idealism is a set of philosophical perspectives asserting that most fundamentally reality is equivalent to mind, spirit, or consciousness, that reality is entirely a mental construct, or that ideas are the highest type of reality or have the greatest claim to being considered real. Because there are different types of idealism, it is difficult to define the term uniformly. I don't understand why things seem to break apart so much. Like, what is the difference between analytic idealism and idealism generally? Maybe it's just more specific in some of his models. I'd have to look. It's been a while since I have, done a deep dive on his work. But it's, analytic idealism is idealism. It is the idea. It is the, assertion that reality, quote unquote, it's not a word I like very much, but is fundamentally ideas or within a mind, or is mind, is consciousness. I don't know exactly which one he would say. But I mean, the fact that it's called idealism suggests that it should be asserting that ideas are, what reality is fundamentally, or what existence is fundamentally. But this is why I don't like the term reality, because if you say existence, ideas cannot be what is fundamentally, existing. It is not, cannot be ideas, because they are within the mind of a being. They must be in the mind of a being, or a being is a mind in Sentient Singularity Theory. When I say mind, I mean a being. So it's just, mind is the term for the structure / process that a being, goes through, or is, I guess, both of those things. Whereas, you have a brain, but you are a mind. That's the difference. So, analytic idealism, though, is just idealism. Its existence is fundamentally conscious. We'll say that, even though I don't like the name idealism, if that's the case. Call it consciousnessism, or sentientism, or sentient singularity theory, or something like that. But in this video that by Bernardo Kastrup, he talks about the universal consciousness, what I call, informally God, and I guess you could say sometimes formally, but you could also descriptively, in sentient singularity just theory, call it sentient existence. And what is the properties that he assumes this being that is conscious existence or sentient existence to have. And kind of, we're going to talk about the differences between sentient singularity theory and, I guess you could say mainly my ideas within sentient singularity theory, and his ideas that have formulated, analytic idealism. So I really do respect Bernardo Kastrup. I will say I think his work is a step in the right direction for sure. I think that it's great to see him take on some of the physicists that are out there that are more, physicalists in their perspective. If you watch my video on sentient singularity theory that is linked below on the Ekkolapto channel, um, you will see how sentient singularity theory bridges idealism and materialism and kind of shows that they are two sides of one coin. They're not actually neither one is fundamental and neither one is wrong. But I do think that Bernardo has a very good understanding of actually what is responsible for physics. And as I've said on here before, sentient singularity theory is a metaphysics theory. It is not a physics theory. It is related, but it's related to biology and sociology and morality and chemistry and technology just as much. We are looking for, not with a fundamental theory, we're not looking for a more fundamental physics theory. You can be looking for a more fundamental physics theory, potentially, I guess. I don't even know if that's the right way to describe a different physics theory, like geometric unity, perhaps. I would not even call it a fundamental physics theory. I would say it's a unifying physics theory, is kind of more what I would define it as, which, I mean, geometric unity, it kind of makes sense, but I don't know if you could say it's more fundamental than our two current frameworks of physics, but it is unifying, or it's an attempt to be unifying, and I think there's value there. But when we're looking for a fundamental theory, we're not looking for a physics theory. We're looking for what is a theory that explains physics, explains the perception of physical existence and also the mental experience, and that is going to be a metaphysics theory of mind or of sentience or of consciousness and ideas, I guess you could say. And I think Bernardo has a very good handle on what is responsible for physics. If you watch him discuss things with physicists on other channels and in various interviews, he's quite good, and I agree with a lot of what I've heard him say. But as a disclaimer, it is listed below. I don't agree with anyone on everything, but I agree with everyone on something. So with that, let's get to the first clip. Yo, what's up? What's up, Addy? Did fantastic. Thank you. Excited for the next one. Yeah, me too. I'm very excited. That was, honestly, guys, I will just say this. I was stressed out about my my talk that I gave at FAU. Like, I don't know exactly why, but I mean, I do this every night, but there was something a little different about it just because of the more formal kind of nature of the medium than my just weekly live streams, which are anything but formal if you are a regular visitor. But it was intimidating. Actually, I was very intimidated, much more so than I was expecting. But we figured it out. I learned a lot from it, and that's what is really important. But I think it came out good, or well. I don't even know exactly what is grammatically the best way to say that. But first clip.
So the question that immediately arises is, okay, if we are authors of this spatially unbound field of subjectivity that underlies all nature, I'll call it universal consciousness in short. If we are authors of universal consciousness, what is this universal consciousness? Well, strictly speaking, from an analytic perspective, all that we need to know about it is that it is experiential in nature. In other words, that it entails subjectivity, that it is qualitative as opposed to purely quantitative. Quantities are descriptions of it, but in and of itself, it is qualitative, experiential, subjective from its own perspective, even though it is objective from our perspective, in the same sense that the thoughts of another person are objective from your perspective, but they are subjective from their own perspective. So all we need is to say that universal consciousness is essentially subjective. It entails what philosophers today call core subjectivity. Now, what is core subjectivity? Imagine that you
So what he's getting at here we go, is he's talking about, when he says universal consciousness, he's saying that because analytic idealism presupposes or, asserts, however you want to say it, that existence is fundamentally, ideas within a mind, or is reality is, fundamentally mental structure, that, or consciousness is a term I don't like, but sentience, I would say, but I don't even know if he would use that term yet, and we'll get to why. But he's saying that existence itself is a consciousness, is a mind, and that it has ideas that are objective for us, but are subjective for it. So it has a subjective experience, is what he's saying, and I agree with this, and this is what Sentient Singularity Theory asserts: is that that what we observe as our concrete physical constraints and degrees of freedom, our world, our physical world, is the mind, or they are. It is the thoughts of the mind that we are within. So we are a mind within a mind, and the thoughts of the mind that we're within trump ours because of just an intrinsic hierarchy, because our world is its mind. Okay? So if you're a mind inside a mind, then your world is the mind of the mind that you are within. Try and follow that, but it does make sense, I think, if you can. And what this means is that the thoughts and the cognitive constructs that are within the mind that we are within, that is our world, are going to trump our own. So that means we can't just think them away. Like, I can think about a red elephant, and then I can think about a blue elephant, and I can change its color, and I can think about a green one, and then I can think about a white elephant. But if I see an elephant in Africa or at the zoo, I can't just think its color different. And so that means that there's coherence and information processing that is happening in the mind that we were within, that we just have to contend with, because the mind that we are within is the world that we have to navigate. And so it appears to us as its information structures will appear concretized to us. And that's basically the merging of materialism or physicalism and idealism. I mean, maybe not exactly in the definition, because each one asserts that it's a different medium is fundamental. Idealism asserts that consciousness is fundamental, or ideas, depending on who you ask. And physicalism or materialism usually means that matter that is unconscious pre-existed sentience. And so is a better way of putting that. And that matter is what is fundamental, but that's not even enough to say. That's why you have to say it in a way that is explaining of what is being assumed to be happening, which is one of these assumes consciousness and ideas exists matter, I guess you could say, or is the context of matter, and then, or the perception of matter. And then the other one assumes that matter, what we observe to be matter, pre-exists the emergence of sentience, or of consciousness, and of mind. And so you kind of have to explain it in a way that shows the directionality and the causality that's being assumed in each framework. Can't just say, that idealists don't believe in matter, or materialists don't believe in mind. It's that, which one came first, and not even that, but is sentience, or is consciousness, or is mind fundamental, or is there, an unconscious dust that is fundamental, and then there's, mind that emerges from it or evolves from it. And so sentient singularity theory definitely would fall into being defined as a type of idealism, you could say, but it's a very specific and well outlined type of idealism. It has stages of sentience that are proposed, models of what generally what structures would be sentient and what structures would not, and has context that that is assumed to explain the perception of matter and also the conception of ideas. And so I would say idealism, or analytic idealism at least, does seem to have the latter. I don't think it has the former, actually, from what I've seen. And there's a very specific difference that I've noticed between sentient singularity theory and many other, I guess you could say, idealistic or forms of idealism, or panpsychism, almost, you could say, that are proposed, different theories of panpsychism, different theories of idealism, and that is very different in how they conceive of God or of sentient existence, and what the properties of that are. And so he's basically saying you're an alter of this being, of God, of which, when I say God, I mean the initial eternal being that is existence itself, that is sentient. That's what I mean. And he is saying that conscious existence, or the conscious universe, as he kind of describes it, or the universal consciousness, creates these alters within itself, and not due to its goal being that's very different from sentient singularity theory. We'll get to that in a minute, but somehow creates these alters, which are you and me and birds and every sentient or conscious being that has been created within the universe is a disassociated alter of the universal consciousness. And I would say that this is to some degree true. I don't think it's the most relevant or important way of looking at this, to be honest, but it is technically not wrong. If you think about like a knot, if you imagine like a string that is a loop with no beginning, no end, and it's just a string of information referencing itself, this is existence fundamentally. And imagine it ties itself into a knot and kind of cuts off the information from outside of that little knot, but it's still got this little loop that's created within itself. That's kind of a metaphor that you can use to kind of visualize what's happening. It's a partition of mind from the universal mind, and it does kind of create these disassociated alters. But this was my issue with Leo Gura when he was on Kurt Jaimangal's podcast, is he was saying, you are God who forgot that you were God. And this is basically what Bernardo is saying. He goes on to say, imagine you were basically in a sensory deprivation tank, and you also had amnesia, and you forgot who you were or what you were, and then you had to kind of restart, and Jason Bourne style. But this is exactly what Leo Gura was saying, and it's not technically wrong, but it's not useful, I don't think. I don't find it useful because it's not orienting, and it doesn't naturally kind of include or highlight a hierarchy that's going on and a goal to this. It's just this technical thing that is kind of logically inevitable. And so it's not wrong, but I don't think that it's helpful, at least to me. Maybe it is to you, I don't know. But for me, it's more helpful, and not wrong, by the way, to see the difference between me and the universal consciousness, and that I am within this being and created by this being, much more, that I find that much more useful and also true to the goal, at least according to Sentient Singularity Theory, of the universal consciousness, of sentient existence, of God. And I think that we should honor God's goals. But if you believe that God has goals, but Bernardo does not. So here we go, though, to go on with these disassociated alters.
Is to say that universal consciousness is essentially subjective. It entails what philosophers today call core subjectivity. Now, what is core subjectivity? Imagine that you are in a perfect sensor deprivation chamber where it's perfectly dark, perfectly silent, and you're floating in water and you don't even feel your skin touching anything. In other words, you have no perceptions. Now imagine further that you become amnesic for a moment while inside that sensor deprivation chamber. You don't know, you no longer remember your name, you don't know where you were born, you don't know what you do for a living, who you're married to, you forget everything. Now for a moment, when you forget everything and you perceive nothing, only one thing will be left, which is pure subjectivity. It is a field with potential experiences, but no memories, no perceptions, no discernible particular experience, just a potentiality for experience, and a sort of I-ness, or a me-ness. I-ness would be better, a pure I-ness without a narrative of self-identity.
Okay, so this is part of my issue. Is when you say, I mean, I don't disagree with kind of what he's saying, but when he says something like, "Oh, it's this is what philosophers call, core subjectivity. It is a field of potentiality of experience, and a pure me-ness or I-ness, but without the concept of self." How can you in the same sentence say it's the kind of experience of me-ness or I-ness, but with no potential, conception of the self? I'll tell you what you get when you have no external experiences, or as he's kind of saying, or any external perceptions, and it's just you in this sensory deprivation tank, and there's no one else. What do you perceive? Yourself. That's the only thing to perceive, is the self. You can't not perceive the self. That's kind of, due to the logic of sentient fundamentality, or the fundamentality of sentience, is that existence is self-contained because it is all that exists, and it is intrinsically by definition one, and therefore self-referential, because what else is it going to reference? So you say it doesn't have any perception. That's not true. It perceives the self. Oh, it is pure me-ness, pure I-ness, but without a conceptualization of self. I don't understand that, and I don't think it makes sense. I mean, how can you have the concept of me-ness or I-ness without a conceptualization of self? And how can there be an information system that exists? And if it is all that exists, then it can only reference itself, and it's therefore self-referential, but somehow it's not able to conceive of the self. I would say that all it perceives, at least, is the self. And so I don't agree with that part of what he's saying. I don't think that, maybe I'm misunderstanding what he's stating, and I recognize that very well could be the case, but I feel like that is kind of self-contradictory, that there's this conceptualization of me-ness or I-ness, but without the conceptualization of the self. That is the conceptualization of the self, is I am me. Maybe let me know in the comments what you think. It's been a while. Have you ever died before? I don't know, and I have to think about what that even means to answer it. Obviously a lot of people talk about past lives and, being possible, and it's not, it is something that is perfectly compatible with sentient singularity theory. But I would imagine that if it's it is something that occurs, which I would think probably, maybe, but that's just a feeling I have. I don't really have a logical argument for that. Um, I I would imagine that it's due to the decisions of God, and not and therefore not something that we can predict or even should try and kind of necessarily, um, I guess, model or assume is predictable, because I don't think that I think that it ultimately would be due to decision, of the being that we're within. So I don't focus on past lives or anything like that too much. Is it possible? Yes. Is it compatible with sentient singularity theory? Yes. Is it formally part of sentient singularity theory? No. Uh, there is a one kind of semi-relevant aspect to it, in sentient singularity theory, dealing with how does one level in the periodicity of sentience form the next? How do you up level? How do you get an organism from an assembly of cells? But that's for another day. But that's not what I'm guessing you're talking about. But in general past lives, it's not something that's incompatible with my work, but it's not something that's formally part of it either. And I don't focus on it. I think we're here to do something, and we should focus on what we can do here. And we can conceive of what could happen to us after this, but then I don't know how much you could conceive of what would happen to you after that. The what is the afterlife kind of, what is some things about it, logical constraints about it. I think we can talk about that and extrapolate that or deduce some of those. But as far as, were you I don't know, a pilot in a past life, or were you a bird? I'm not mocking it. It's certainly possible, but I don't. But it doesn't. I'm not concerned with it, and I don't really know how much it really is a great way of describing that, because what is you is this coherence of the conceptualization of self, and we here do not have usually a coherent conceptualization of self that extends, prior to birth, and or even prior to conception. So I don't know how accurate it is to even say like a past life. Was that really you? It would be my first question. There's a guy named Matthias De Stefano, and I'm not claiming that I think he's legit or not. I never watch his content. I've never seen anything more than like 5 minutes of his content, and I'm skeptical. I will say that's just my feeling, but I also am, embarking on this project has humbled me and made me just, usually try and assume that people are being honest, and that people are capable of some pretty amazing things that you wouldn't usually think that they were capable of, sometimes outside of the institutions. But he claims to have all these memories of his past life. I don't know. You can watch his content and it would be much more about that. Like I said, I'm skeptical, but that's just a feeling that I have, partially because, is that really you? I mean, I guess if you remember them, then maybe it is you, but if you don't, then it's not. I don't know how much it makes sense to call it that person you. But please hit the like button, by the way, if you are watching this and you're finding this interesting. It helps fuel the algorithm. I really appreciate it. And comment any questions that you have in the chat. But let's continue.
Experience that will remain when you are completely amnesic in a perfect sensory.
Here, let's go to. Here he's talking about, what is God's experience is like? What is the properties of God, essentially?
Is core subjectivity. Now, does it have its own experiences outside the experiences of living beings? It surely has, because when we look up to the sky, to the cosmos is dynamic. there are stars going supernova, there are black holes, there are galaxies colliding, stuff is happening. Now, stars are burning, planets are moving around their orbits, volcanoes are erupting in moons. A lot of stuff is happening. And that stuff is a representation on our dashboard of the mental activity of the universal consciousness. And if the representation is dynamic, then there is dynamic stuff happening in universal consciousness. Next to core subjectivity, which is what it is also having particular experiences, which are like excitations of core subjectivity. You can imagine core subjectivity as a guitar string. If the guitar string is at rest, there is no sound. But if you pluck it and you excite it, it makes a sound. Experiences are the sounds of core subjectivity. But notice that there is nothing to the sound produced by a guitar string when you pluck it, other than the string itself. The only thing that exists is the string. Whether it's at rest or being excited, there is only the string. So there is only core subjectivity, even if there are experiences, because experiences are excitations of the core subjectivity that the universal consciousness is. And then you might ask, okay, what do those experiences of universal consciousness feel like? And the only honest answer is, I don't know, and nobody alive can know. We are dissociated from it. All we can access are the representations, the extrinsic appearances of those experiences as represented on our dashboard. And we call them galaxies and galaxy clusters and supernovae and black holes and quasars and whatnot, planets and moons and volcanoes and rocks. But how they feel from their own first-person perspective, we cannot know. What we can say is the following.
Okay, I don't think that like galaxies and things like that are very relevant. They're not part of sentient singularity theory, really. They're sentient singularity theory focuses on what is fundamental structures, which are not structures that are defined within space. They are it is focused on structures that are beyond space. You might say, well, what structures are beyond space? Sentient structures are beyond space. Where are you? You know, some people would say, well, you're in this, part of the brain. I don't agree with that, and it doesn't even make sense with your experience. But there are it is probably the general establishment assumption that you are inside of your brain. But you are a mind, not. Your brain is not your mind. It is kind of this entanglement point of information, of various information systems that make up your beingness, your body, your mind. Your mind includes your senses, and includes your environment that you make use of as well. Your phone, your desk, your office, your car. Anytime that you're using or operating while using some structure to extend yourself, it becomes part of your mind. And so, there is a more core part of your mind that is, what is experienced as your physical body. And then there's even more core part of your mind that is, I don't even know if that's the best way to say that, but there's a perspective of your mind that it perceives your you-ness, from a kind of like an impactable perspective. And then there's your you-ness from an impacting or an extending perspective, which would include much more readily every tool that you make use of, and obviously your limbs and things like that. So, but when he says, these galaxies and things like that are, we don't know what it's like to experience the galaxies from the core subjectivity of the universe. This is a structure that we see, okay, from within the mind of the universal being, or of God, of the sentient universe. It is a structure that we see due to the relationships and interactions of all sentient beings within the singular sentient existent being, or sentient existence, the being that is sentient existence, God. That's when I say God, that's what I mean. I mean, existence itself is a singular being that is self-aware and sentient, and that is what I call God. Is the initial, eternal being. Actually, interestingly enough, let's look at this. Every week, I try and remember these attributes of sentient existence or God that we've come up with on this channel, and I always forget them, but I wrote them down and I started making some models here. So basically, we've got the 4 primary perspectives here. This is the core of Sentient Singularity Theory, core model. But we have these 4 omnis, which is interesting that it's 4. Omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. But before I even, looked these up, I was just thinking about it, and it's like, basically it is initial, eternal, inevitable, and total. So that's what God is. God is initial. He is the initial being. He is the eternal being, meaning he is beyond time. He is and never ending, and he is the initial being. He is the first being. He is the inevitable being. He is the being that is that must be, and in various, for various different reasons and in various different I guess you could say processes. And then he is total. He is all encompassing. He is existence itself. And these are kind of what I think each of these is getting at, is, creating, perceiving, sustaining, experiencing. I don't know how these are not, I haven't really thought that deeply about these, but these 4 I have thought quite a bit about. And these are the, pre-outlined, I think they would be Christian descriptions of or Christian attributes of God, but they would apply to Judaism and Islam and Sikhism as well. So omnibenevolence is, loving, and omniscient is to know everything. Omnipresent is always present, ever present, and omnipotent is all powerful. And I would agree with all of these as well. They are perfectly consistent with sentient singularity theory. And we just, sometimes I think it's important to update terms, and that doesn't even mean we have to get rid of these terms, but I would say that these are accurate as well. They're not more accurate or less accurate, they're just also accurate. These are, these are just kind of descriptions that I've been working on. But so the being that is total, inevitable, initial, and eternal, that is God. What is God like? He's all-knowing. He is ever-present. He's all-powerful, and he is good. So I would agree with all those things, but then in analytic idealism is not consistent with that, I would say. And here we'll get into why in these clips.
Be a temptation to equate universal consciousness with a divinity, with God. It's difficult to say whether I think this is a good idea or not, because I don't know what most people mean by God. There are probably 7.5 billion different definitions of God in the world today. So whatever I say, it will make no sense. So I will limit myself to say something that I can say with some confidence.
Existence itself is a singular sentient being that is self-aware. That is God. It is the inevitable definition. It's not just mine.
We are self-aware. We have what psychology calls meta-cognition. In other words, not only do we experience, we know that we experience. We explicitly recognize ourselves as a subjective entity that has experiences. And that's why we say, I have hunger, or I feel sad, as opposed to I am hunger and I am sadness. This distinction between our experiences and our core subjectivity, this distinction between the guitar string excited and the guitar string at rest, is what metacognition allows us to make. It allows us to think about our thoughts, to ponder our emotions. And this metacognition as a mental function has evolved at very great cost, over 4 billion years of evolution on a planetary ecosystem. The universal consciousness did not have to undergo evolution within a planetary ecosystem. It never has had to react to environmental challenges and eke out a living. It is unlikely that it is metacognitive itself, because metacognition very much seems to be the end result of 4 billion years of evolution. So we have it. My cat has less of it. The amoeba swimming on my garden pond probably has none of it. Are all three of them, I, my cat, and the amoeba, alters of the universal consciousness? I think so. We are all three living, metabolizing entities, which is the sort of empirical giveaway of a dissociative process in the mind of nature. But not all three are metacognitive. Only the most evolved one, me, seems to be metacognitive. So metacognition seems to be a product of evolution that we conquered at great, great cost over a very long time. It doesn't seem to be there from the beginning. Otherwise, maybe amoebas would be metacognitive. And I know some scientists would say, you know what, Bernardo, amoeba can even build their own conical-shaped houses by picking up mud particles from the bottom of your garden pond. And I know that can happen. But I think we could all agree that lower life forms, not in an ethical sense, lower in an evolutionary sense, exhibit a lot less signs of a metacognition than higher, more evolved life forms. Metacognition does not seem to be there from the get-go, does not seem to be there from the beginning. It's not there in mosquitoes, it's not there in frogs, it's not there in fish. At least we have no reasons to think that it is there, but it is there in people. It may be there in pachyderms, elephants. It may be there in cetaceans, whales and dolphins. And it's certainly there in humans. So I think we can say with some confidence that the universal consciousness outside highly evolved life forms is not metacognitive. If you apply the word God to it, then you have a God that is a natural God, a God that acts spontaneously. It does what it does because it is what it is, not because it has a plan, not because it has thought things through, not because it has a premeditated idea about where it wants to go. No, it is spontaneous. It unfolds because it is what it is. To be is to have properties. So universal consciousness has.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. First of all, this, let me just say, to be, he says, to be is to have properties. So what are, God's properties? To be definition. To exist, to occur, to take place. Let's say a being. I don't think to be is a, to be or to not, or not to be. It's like, this is within the context of sentience. I don't think that we don't, I'm trying to think of examples in our language where in English, when we say like that to be, the scissors to be, they be, the scissors they be, I guess. Like, we don't say that. A being is a sentient being. Like, a being is not just a thing. There are things in Sentient Singularity Theory and beings, and things come from and are defined by and perceived by beings, but they are not. Sometimes they are created by beings, but they are not. Beings do not come from things. Things come from beings in Sentient Singularity Theory, and Analytic Idealism should assume the same thing. If it assumes that consciousness is fundamental, then things come from beings. If matter is perceived as the dashboard by a mind, then not a description that I like very much, but I understand why it could be helpful. The much better description is you are inside the mind, another mind, and the mind that you are within is the world that you have to navigate. And so the thoughts of that mind they trump yours. They're higher in the hierarchy because that being is higher in the intrinsic fundamental hierarchy than you. Then Matryoshka doll is inside of another Matryoshka doll. And so I need to get like a Matryoshka doll type thing that's just a head. It's like just mind. So this, but this definition of to be is to have properties. How is that even useful? I'm not going to say it's wrong or right. It's just, how is that even a useful definition? I don't think it should be the definition. To be is to be a being. It should mean to be a being. And I think any other definition is confusing and almost like contradictory of the definition of a being. So we say, I just Googled being, and it says existence. Okay, but the nature of existence of a person. what I mean by being. Now, the fact of existence, as opposed to non-existence, conscious mortal existence, life, our being is as instantaneous, our being is as an instantaneous flash of light in the midst of eternal night. I don't know who said that, but I don't like it. I don't hate if I don't like it. So I don't think that definition is helpful, but I think it's just added words. But to be is to be a being, and to be a being is a sentient being. It is self-aware. It is a someone. It is not just a something. It's a something that is also a someone, fundamentally. So, but then he goes on though to say, or he said prior to that, that God, or he's afraid of calling, this universal consciousness God, or thinking of it as divine, because he doesn't think it's metacognitive. And I don't really like this term metacognitive. Metacognitive. I think it's given way more importance than it actually should have. Metacognition refers to the awareness and understanding of one's own thinking processes and the ability to control and regulate these processes. I would agree that humans are metacognitive. I don't know if God is metacognitive. I think I feel like I should assume that God is beyond metacognitive, because how could we be metacognitive within God? Or at least he's metacognitive as soon as there are beings within himself that he's created that are metacognitive. But I don't think that it matters whether or not he's metacognitive. I think that this is the wrong thing to focus on. And what is metacognition? I've talked about this before. This is why there's a knife here. It's the quintessential tool. It's the blade. It's the tool that we use to make other tools. It's not just a tool that we use to do things. It's a tool that we use to make other tools as well. It was the first tool that we used to make other tools. You can't make anything from a hammer that's a tool, really. Not that's like constructive. But you can from a blade. A blade allows you to do this, is to cut structure, that basically project abstract imagined structure into concrete reality by carving it out. That's what a blade allows you to do. You can't just do that with a hammer. What are you going to do? You just smash something into a bunch of pieces. That's all you can do with a hammer. You can do a lot with a blade. You can carve structure. And so I've talked about on here before, a mentor of mine, who is a famous zoologist. He told me about when he was in high school. He took the shop class, and in the shop class, the teacher in high school at the beginning of the semester said, "Okay, everybody write down what you want to build this semester." Everybody wrote it down. Then he said, "Okay, now we're going to build the tools that we need to build what you want to build," and that is metacognition. That it is the ability to make tools. That's what humans have that's unique. When Bernardo says, well, some people say the amoebas can construct little, shells out of sludge. That's true. Any animal that digs a hole is using tools. It is tool use. In fact, you could almost say it's tool. It's like tool building. But tool use is like crawling under a rock. Tool building would be like digging a hole and making an ant, castle, I guess, whatever it's called. And the tunnels and things that an ant colony makes, or that a termite mound, this is a tool that is being made. It's not just tool use. It's tool building. It's the step above even tool use. And it's being done by ants and bees and wasps and termites. It's not being done by elephants only. But elephants use tools. You could probably find instances or examples of elephants making tools, but same thing with dolphins and things like that. But But ants are really, like, they really make tools. They don't just use tools; they really make tools, even much more advanced than dolphins and other primates. And this is sign that that's not necessarily that important when it comes to, I guess, defining or analyzing sentience. I think an ant is just as sentient as an elephant, or as a dolphin. I don't think actually a dolphin or an elephant is that much more sentient than an ant. I don't even think it really is more sentient than an ant. Either one of those. Many people would disagree with that, but I don't think so. Maybe humans are a step above, but that is due to metacognition a little bit, but it's not, again, it doesn't matter. It's not more sentient. It's not more self-aware. We build tools to make tools. We're different than ants even, and that's a step above every other animal. We make tools to make tools. That's due to our abstraction ability, and that abstraction ability allows us to imagine our own mental processes and use them. That's what this whole channel is about. And I've said here before, I used to say, and I still do, I want to work out more. But then I realized, no, I want to work out. It's like I had to examine my mental processes in order to come to that conclusion. That's metacognition. It's not a critical thing to self-awareness. I don't think it is self-awareness even. Beings or sentient singularities or minds, sentient beings, including the universal sentient being or universal consciousness, God, they feel. A being feels. It can think, and I've said this before, thinking is an action. It's like an ability, but it's not an intrinsic thing that you do. It's actually something you have to try to do, and you can practice and get better at. But feeling is something that you don't have to practice and get better at. It's something that you just do. It's not something that you can do. It's something that you can't not do. It's different. And it's this feeling that is what self-awareness really is. Feeling, especially the feeling of emotion, but also the feeling of, sensation, is the feeling of self. It's you feeling yourself. That's what you don't feel when you feel something hot. You don't feel, when you put your hand on a fire, you don't feel the fire. You feel the effect of the fire on you, on your skin, on your physically perceived body. And then when you think about how it's going to scar you for life, and it drives you, it causes an emotion that's you feeling your selfness, your I-ness, your me-ness, not just your body, your physically perceived body, but your structure that is beyond physicality, your someone-ness, your soul, you could say. You are a soul. People say, do you have a soul? You are a soul. It's like saying, do you have a mind? You are a mind. It's such a bad question of, do you have a soul? You are a soul. If there's no soul, there's no you. You don't have a mind. You are a mind. If there's no mind, there is no you. And so, but it is feeling that is responsible for your self-awareness. It's defining of self-awareness. Think about what it means to be self-aware, to be aware of self, either physically, or soulfully or mentally, via sensations, feelings of pressure and heat and texture, or the feeling of emotion, which is, you really like internalizing an experience, or thought that is also an experience. And this is you being aware of self. It is you sensing self. It's feeling. Descartes should not have said, I think, therefore I am, even though it's true that only sentient beings can think. That doesn't mean that they intrinsically do always. It's something that they're capable of. What really more accurate would be more fundamentally true to say is, I feel, therefore I am, than I think, therefore I am. And so I think the focus is wrong with Bernardo Kastrup. He's focusing on thoughts. That's the wrong focus. Thinking is an action that you choose to do and can practice and get better at, but you aren't always intrinsically doing. It is the same thing as running or moving, your arms and legs. You could say it's like mental movement is what thinking is. It's mental movement. But you don't necessarily have to move your body. And just the same, you don't have to move your mind. You don't have to think. When you just veg out and watch TV at the end of the night, like you're not really thinking the whole time. You're kind of probably trying to shut off. That's what I try and do. And at least most of the time. But you can't shut off feeling ever. You feel. Sentient beings feel. They can think. They do feel. And so Descartes wasn't wrong, but it wasn't as fundamentally true as it could be. The statement is, I feel, therefore I am. It's much better because feeling is self-awareness. You don't have to be metacognitive to be self-aware. That's just that's like being more kinesthetically aware. It's like, which kinesthetic awareness is like your awareness of your body in space. If you're like a martial artist or a dancer or an athlete, you have good kinesthetic awareness. It's something you develop. And that's also true of metacognition. Like humans are a being that's capable of metacognition, capable of thinking and capable of metacognition, which is thinking about your thinking. But you don't even intrinsically think, let alone think about your thinking. And so I don't think that it is, I don't think and I don't feel like it is the right thing to focus on. It's not. What matters is to think about, is God self-aware? Yes. What does that mean? He feels. He has feelings. That's what it means. It doesn't mean he can think about his thoughts. And can he do that? Yes. And there's a lot more to that discussion. And also there's going to be parts of that discussion that we'll never be able to include because we are not God. So we don't know that's like the part of us that we'll never understand. The part of God that we'll never understand is like the limits of his metacognition. He might be able to be like super metacognitive. I feel like that would be what I would want to bet is the case, but I don't even know exactly what that means. And so I don't think it's possible for me to, with the nature of my being, I don't think it's possible to conceive of that, because I would have to at that level, conception and perception are the same, because you're talking about a mind that is existence. And so if you're not that being, and you're not the initial eternal being that is existence itself, you just can't perceive it or conceive it. And so it is a limit. But I don't think that focusing on it matters to trying to think about whether or not God is self-aware. Of course, God is self-aware. To describe a being or sentient singularity, which is a description of the structure/process or the structure/nature, structure being singular, nature being sentient, is to call it just like a field of core subjectivity. Is I get it. It means like God has a subjective perspective, and that God's subjective perspective is our objective perspective, because of what I said earlier, an intrinsic hierarchy, due to just the nested structure of the cosmos, of creation. But this is not, I think that it's not just good or like nice to focus on the someone-ness of this structure, of this being that is the universal consciousness, that is God, that is sentient existence. I think it is critical to focus on the someone-ness of this being. As I've said on here before, if aliens landed here tomorrow and they had to know about you. You wanted them to know, or they had an understanding of you. There were two different understandings. One of them was you are a structure that consumes calories and excretes them, and has this pump that pumps these oxygen carrying structures around your various extremities. Imagine an alien knew all of that about you, and then nothing else, and then another alien knew that you were someone, you had feelings, that you felt, you feel. It's the best way of putting it. You feel. You are someone who feels. Which one has a better understanding of you? Like, think about that sentence, of you, not of the body that is the human body, of you. Your you-ness, your someone-ness. It's the latter. And so if you want to understand the universal consciousness or sentient existence, God, you have to focus on his someone-ness. That's why I say him. It's not a male, but he's higher than us in the hierarchy. So of will. That's what I mean. It's like his will trump ours. We cannot outwill God just by logic. Just like your cell can't outwill you. You can be like, no. And if you're aware that your cell's will is contrary to your will, you can just cut it out. But if you want to understand God, you have to understand his someone-ness. I say him because, like I said, he's higher in the hierarchy. It's not male, but being a someone that's higher than us in the hierarchy. And really, if you think about God, God is like almost like a masculine mind in a feminine body, because God has the ability to create within himself. That's like a female attribute. But God is the active consciousness. He's not reactive, because there was no one to react to prior to the creation of multiplicity of sentience. But he created multiplicity of sentience, not reacting to anyone else. So therefore, he's active. He's mentally masculine, I guess you could say, but in kind of bodily feminine in a way, but not really the same, but kind of. Just meaning has the ability to create other beings within himself. But it's a little different than a woman or a female. But here, let me go to the chat. By the way, please hit the like button if you're watching this and you find it valuable. It really helps, and I really appreciate it. You keep your thoughts, but you are feelings, but the feelings are gone. Imagine yourself being dead. You keep your thoughts, but the feelings are gone. Your feelings change because your perception changes, but you do keep your memories and your experiences. You kind of have to. Or else there's no way to preserve information, because that is the context. Information is context, and so you have to preserve the context of the information. You have to preserve the self, and that means like you and your experiences and your temperament and demeanor and wisdom, etc. In an afterlife. But it's funny. People used to say to me all the time, like, heaven is this wonderful place where it's so peaceful, and it's like a cloud. You're on a cloud. It's like this little kid version of heaven is like you're on a cloud, and there's harps playing. You're just so relaxed. So why worry? God's got it. But in a logical kind of extrapolation or deduction of what the afterlife would be like, or in heaven, is where your sentience is saved within the context that defines it, which is the self. Meaning you have to preserve the self, which is all of your experiences and your wisdom and your feelings and your sense of self. you're you. It's preserving you. And then, but what does change is you are no longer going probably bound by to perceiving within the space-time constraints, which means like now you kind of perceive things beyond time a little bit, and because you're outside of causality at this point, like you've passed on from the causal space, and what this means is like you're able to perceive the big picture much more, and you're also able to perceive God much more obviously, I think, and because that's his realm, and is the space of pure, sentience. And what this would allow for is you're increasing your cognitive light cone to basically be all encompassing, and that would give you peace if that's in the context of a sentient being that is good and also, the most powerful and most good being, the being that is omnibenevolent and omnipotent. You perceive that being much more obviously, and you are able to perceive things beyond time. You would just have peace. You wouldn't be worried, because you would know God's got it, and also you would see the greater plan, like than you can see when you're in the causal space, or which is space-time essentially. And it's you that achieves peace. It's not that heaven is peaceful. It's that you, due to what you are able to perceive in the afterlife or in heaven, which is not a term that I object to, would you'd just experience more peace, I believe. And I think that that's a logical, something you can logically extrapolate. It's not just a feeling. It's not just what I want. There's the child's version of theological tradition and mythology, and then there is the philosopher's logical understanding of the theological context, and that they're not in the feeling that they produce is probably not incompatible, but thinking about yourself on a cloud with harps playing and angels everywhere, like, and God is this bright light just shining on you, that produces the feeling of peace, just like you would have if you were actually in heaven. But you can also think about like what that experience would be like a little bit, not exactly. There's a lot more that I think would logically, this would be also produce like the worst shame that you've ever experienced, and the most, I don't know if shame, but like most pain, emotional pain, and most emotional pleasure ever, because you would perceive the impacts of all of your actions throughout your life in a way that transcends time. So you would see that you did this good action and it caused this good thing, which caused this good thing, which caused this good thing, and this good thing, and this good thing, and this good thing, and changed somebody's life in 6 degrees of separation between you and them and Kevin Bacon. And you would also see how if I don't know if you, that was kind of I guess I don't know if it's an inside statement, but there was a movie I think produced called this like 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon or something, and they would try to see if you could connect everyone on Earth or anyone on Earth to Kevin Bacon by like 6 degrees of separation, and I think they were able to do it every time. But you would be able to perceive the impact of your actions down the line, and that includes like your good actions and your positive and negative actions. I think that's a process that you would go through. But this is just me trying to logically deduce it. Anyways, we're getting a bit off topic. But So you can't deduce experiences well beyond like your own physical, like current experiences, I believe. But there are things about God's experience and the limits of his metacognition that I don't think that you can deduce, which I would agree with Bernardo on that, but I would disagree that if he thinks that God is not metacognitive, I would say it's not the thing that makes you self-aware, for one, and second of all, I think he is metacognitive. I mean, he's basically an inverted eyeball looking at his own thoughts within himself, which his thoughts are us. Like, we are part of his thoughts. We're like, part of this system that he's created, and it's that we are the fundamental structures within that system. Is the creation of multiplicity of sentience within his oneness of sentience. This means he's looking at his thoughts. Like, how is that not metacognitive? And he goes on to say some more things about God, but here we go.
And what it does is determined by those properties. Its actions, stars going supernovae, black holes swallowing galaxies, these actions are the spontaneous unfolding of the mental properties of universal consciousness. They are not the product of premeditated design or an explicit plan about where to go. And to me, at least, this is comforting, because a metacognitive God that allows for this bloodbath that survival in a planetary ecosystem is, would be a sadistic God, wouldn't it? Or a God that has a level of intelligence that is completely beyond us, so we cannot understand the reason for all this suffering.
So a lot that I disagree with, and that's different from sentient singularity theory. Sentient singularity theory includes that there is a quote unquote afterlife. There is an experience that is the save space, I call it, instead of the change space, which is kind of the change space is like Xbox Live, and it's like where everybody is just interacting within God's mind, and it's where we make changes on the world, which really means we make changes on each other, where we make changes on other sentient beings. That's what meaning is. It's your impact on another someone, whether that's an animal or another human or God himself, or even cells. Like, your impact on other someones is meaning, because fundamentally there's nothing besides someone, and then someones after the creation of multiplicity of sentience within that oneness of someone, that single initial someone. But there's also this save space where after we like our journey comes to an end, and your sentience is, at least for most people, I believe this is kind of like, I think it's the default. Doesn't mean that it can't be overridden by God. He could delete you, just like you can choose to delete a file. He can choose to delete a file. You can also have your file just be corrupted by your own self, and you're kind of like a co-writer on your file. You're this story that's the sentient file in the sentient Word doc, and you are writing and God is writing, and you're like, and then I did this, and God is like, and then this happened because of that. And then you're like, and then I did this, and God is like, and then this happened because of that. Or which really means, like, you say, and then I did this, and God says, and then I did that. And then you say, and then I did this, and God says, and then I did that. And it's this story. But it is possible, I think, for this story to be corrupted, this file. But it's kind of self-corrupted when that happens. It's when you give up your own agency too much, or you lie to yourself too much, where basically, like, you've just caused such a web of incoherence that you kind of lose your own self-narrative. That doesn't mean you can't be regained with the help of God, but it just means, like, I think it's possible to sell your soul, essentially. That's, you give up your own agency. Selling your soul just means I chose to not have my own goals and pursue my own goals. I chose to just be at the mercy of the will of others who are just using me as a vessel. It's like that's what it means to sell your soul. And so it causes you kind of deleting your own self. There's no more. And then I did this in the story. It's like it's just you know. Then this was done to me. This was done. Then this was done, and this was done. You don't even say to me anymore. But there is this safe space, which is like the afterlife in Sentient Singularity Theory. And if you include this in the model, then the issue that he comes up to, the emotional issue that he comes to, where what kind of good God could have, with that it has its own, freedom of will and its own ability to make choices, would make choices that would result in such a bloodbath of this world. And, when people say this, there's multiple issues with it. For one, their model usually doesn't include kind of resolution that is outside of space-time. So it's like, some kid gets hurt. It's like horrible. Some crazy accident, a tree falls on him or something. That happened when I was a wedding photographer. That happened to at a wedding that a videographer that I knew was shooting that wedding, and a tree, after a bunch of rain in California, you can look it up, it's in the news, it was horrible. Tree fell on the bride's mom during the wedding and killed her. And it's like, what, you could sit there and you could be like, what kind of God would allow for that or cause that? And you can't really argue that it's her fault necessarily, at least not directly. But there's multiple things. For one, God knows the impact that event is going to have on other people's lives, or could have on other people's lives going forward, that we just don't. And God also, if there's an afterlife, then that, her mom might be at peace, and knowing that this is going to be part of some greater plan that's painful, but is also like, ultimately everybody will be at peace and everybody will be all right. That is, that she's focused on in the story. Her daughter, her, husband, whatever, whoever else is important. And so that's part of this that Bernardo is missing. The other part that is missing from this narrative is the recognition that we make choices. And a lot of the suffering in this world, I would say actually probably most of human suffering is due to human choices, not God's choices, humans' choices. When it says in theological traditions that we, bit from the fruit of the tree of knowledge and left the garden, the fruit of the tree of knowledge is technology. And look at the back of your Apple product. It's a bitten apple for a reason. It's the tree of knowledge. It's information built generation after generation. Somebody figures out how to forge titanium. The next person figures out how to make plastic from oil. The next person figures out the design of a what's it called, the oh my gosh, bolt pen. I don't know, the pen. It's a ballpoint pen, but it's it's got like a bolt on it. I forgot the name of it, but and each of these technologies or these discoveries stack on top of each other generation after generation is the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Literally, the super literal tree of knowledge is technology. And what this does is it's us trying to build our own world without the wisdom and the big picture perception of God. It's like you're short-sighted and you are trying to build your own world while not being able to perceive the big picture. You're going to cause a lot of chaos and suffering in humanity. And so you can't ignore that. Theological traditions understand this usually, and but when we get into the scientific thinkers, a lot of them just don't. It's either God is good and everything would be good if God was good and actually had free will and choice, then everything would be good. And if God is bad, then we would have this. And I don't want to think that God is bad. So God either doesn't exist or he has no choice ability. But you have choice ability. So you have to take some responsibility, and there's a lot of responsibility to be taken for the suffering that exists in humanity, and it's due to our metacognition, our metacognitive ability that allows for us to actually like really create as much suffering and horror as we do. But nature is never. There's always pain in creation, in the cosmos. Beings get eaten. Even before humans evolved with their metacognition. You ever seen what happens when African wild dogs catch a gazelle? They eat it alive. It's not like a big cat where they kill you first. They eat you alive. That existed prior to humans, and that's painful. Don't think that gazelle doesn't know what's going on. It knows exactly what's going on, and it feels exactly what's going on. But afterwards, does it go to a peaceful, safe state? That the soul of that gazelle? I don't know. I think probably, but certainly possible. But so when people are kind of morally judging the world, you also have to morally judge yourself. If you're going to judge the world, you're part of it, and other people are part of it. And so, aside from that, he's talking about God as being just natural. I would say God is natural. God is inevitable in Sentient Singularity Theory. Existence is a single structure that is an information structure that is self-referential because there's nothing else to reference. So it's totally self-referential, means totally self-aware, intrinsically, logically, inevitably, totally, initially and eternally. And God couldn't end his existence if he wanted to. Maybe we could. That depends on what happens to you after you die in the change space, or your body dies. But assuming you get deleted or something like that, then technically your existence could be ended. God's existence cannot be ended, even by his own self. People ask, okay, is there a rock so heavy God can't lift it? God cannot end his own existence. That's a limit to God. Cannot overcome his own oneness outside of himself. Means he cannot create other beings outside of him. Everything that exists and everyone else that exists has to be created within him, and he can't end his own existence even if he wanted to. That's, I believe, our constraints that God has, that we don't have. There are other beings outside of us. You are not inside of me. And but even humans, when we replicate, first there's a baby inside of a mother, but then it's born, it's outside the mom. We're never outside God, because nothing outside God. He is existence itself. And so there are constraints to God, and but one of those, because of this means that oneness is his nature, because oneness is the nature of SomeOne-ness. That's why it's called SomeOne. It's not some two-ness, it's SomeOne-ness. And to create multiplicity within singularity, or within oneness of sentience, is to swim upstream, meaning it really has to be a choice. It's going against nature. And so I completely disagree with Bernardo Kastrup as that God has no goals and that this is just random. I do believe God is so heavily constrained that he is very, very, very constrained in what he can do, but he has to choose to do. So, Einstein asked, did God have any choice in the rules of the universe? I would say basically no. Not according to Sentient Singularity Theory, no. He can maybe break them in a moment, but he's still breaking the rules. He can't change the rules completely. They're just logically inevitable due to the nature of interacting nested sentient structures, perceiving, each other. But this, even though if God can't choose, it has no choice in the rules of the universe, he has to choose to make which really means like he has no choice in the laws of physics, but he has to choose to make multiplicity of sentience, which really means like to create the universe, or to create multiplicity within him. That's really what the universe is. There is no creation that is not fundamentally sentient. He can build mental structures within his mind, can start thinking about his thoughts. And that is, yeah, he's building mental structures, I guess you could say, but there's no physical structures being built yet, because physical is a perception of information that cannot be trumped just by your own thinking. So we perceive physicality. God doesn't. God can think away anyone and anything. We can't. So God doesn't perceive things physical. Everything is just thought to him. But what is perceived as true is sentience. And I think that you can think about the feelings of God and the goals of God, and think about God was the only being that has ever been alone. Not lonely, alone. And if we can feel lonely, I think God could feel lonely. But we're never alone. Even if we feel alone, God was alone prior to creation of multiplicity. We can feel meaningless. God is the only being that's ever been meaningless, because meaning is your impact on another someone. We all know this intrinsically, and I'm also stating that there's a logical argument for it, but it's also very consistent with everyone's experience that I've ever met and ever spoken to ever. And if that's not you, you can comment in the chat or in the comments down below, but you'd be in the first. You don't feel meaning by getting cool toys. That's why being wealthy doesn't produce sense of feeling fulfillment. Impact on other people or other beings is what produces a sense of fulfillment, because it produces the feeling of meaningfulness. And so God was meaningless and alone when it was just him. Prior to creation of multiplicity, God was meaningless and alone. Couldn't end his own existence if he wanted to, and was just eternal. And probably extraordinarily bored. Because there's just information going around in a circle, like endlessly. There's nothing or no one else to think about. And so then you create multiplicity. You are now the most meaningful being that exists. You are also the most powerful being, and everybody owes them their own. Everybody else owes their existence to you. And why would you want to end your existence at this point? Because there's so much. You've got a goal that you want to accomplish, is maximize meaning by maximizing sentient beings and their impact on each other, positive impact on each other. You want to maximize the generativity of sentience within the cosmos. And so that's in a quantitative and a qualitative way, in a multiplicative way, and also kind of in a substantive way. And if you can't end your own existence, like, might as well make the most of it. I think we can think about this kind of stuff, and the God probably has had some of these feelings, or has, or at least understands these feelings. Especially, if we do, then he does. But I think even prior to us, Sarah Walker was asked by Lex Fridman, like, why did God create, the universe? And she said, maybe God was lonely. And I was like, that's probably true. Like, he probably was, and bored and feeling meaningless and being meaningless and being alone and not being constructive. It's like the ultimate boredom, ultimate loneliness, ultimate meaninglessness. Of course you would want to create. But I think that he has to choose to do it, because it goes against his nature of oneness. He had no choice in the rules of the universe, meaning laws of physics, really, but he had to choose to create the universe, which really means multiplicity of sentience within his oneness. It's like choosing to partition his oneness. It's not something that just happens. and you know, he goes on to talk about the Big Bang, and he says in this, and he says, you know, the Big Bang, I believe in it, and I don't think that you could believe in a Big Bang or a beginning and believe and have that be coherent with a God that just does things and doesn't have a goal, because a goal has a start and an end, and or at least, you know, a start and an end that signals like the achievement of a goal. You can make another goal and keep moving the goalpost, but like you got to be able to recognize an orient within relationship with this goal. I think God definitely has a goal, and I would say that that goal is primarily to maximize meaning. It's probably not his only goal. Might not be his only goal, but it is maximization of meaning is probably is a primary goal of God, I would imagine. And that's, you know, sentient beings and their impact on each other in a generative manner. So, you know, this idea of, I do think God is natural in that he is inevitable, but I don't think that the cosmos, meaning multiplicity of sentience, is inevitable. And I think that had to be a choice. And that choice was made due to a goal that probably, you know, was conceived of by a super metacognitive God that was lonely and bored and alone and meaningless and wanted to maximize meaning and be entertained, and also, like, you know, be meaningful and be giving and loving and have other someones to exist with. So I don't think that we should just kind of technicalize, I guess, or like kind of, you're almost just you're just focusing on the thingness of God instead of the someone-ness, again, of God. And if you want to understand like the beginning of creation, then you have to think about goals. Like, you can't understand the beginning of creation without thinking about goals. You will create an incoherent model that doesn't really make sense, that there to have a beginning as part of its narrative. If something's just happening naturally because that's the inevitable thing that happens, then there would be no beginning to that process on a fundamental level. You know, no first. There would just be, it's just a rock rolling down an endless hill that, you know, existed. It's never, that rock never was stationary. It just always has been rolling. That doesn't really make sense with other things that Bernardo has said. And it doesn't make sense, I don't think, with our observations, and it doesn't make sense with logic. We have to try and understand existence firsthand first in Sentient Singularity Theory, meaning you look inward to understand the mind of God. You don't look at galaxies. You look at yourself and your feelings and your goals, and that's how you start to understand God, not by looking at galaxies and say, we know that God is dynamic and is thinking. It's like, yeah, okay, but there's so many other reasons why we know that not just looking out at the stars and at outer space. I just don't think that it's the right thing to focus on. But I think that more substantively, it's like he can say he's comforted by the fact that God has no goal. I don't understand how that's comforting. Because, you know, unless maybe in comparison to a sadistic, like, evil, you know, malicious God, but in compared to a non-existent God, it's the same. God has no choice, no ability to make choices, no goals, then there might as well not be a God. Sentient being can make choices. Even in Sentient Singularity Theory, atoms and hadrons and molecules and cells make choices. Just their perception, their ability to perceive and conceive is different. You know, it's scaled, but it's It's not ever absent. Choice is part of will. It's a desire to do, which fundamentally is different than the status quo, which means it's a choice always. And that just is that. There's nothing firsthand that would be coherent with Bernardo's conceptualization of God. And with Bernardo's conceptualization of God, it might as well not be God. It's like he has feelings, he has subjective experience and properties. He is, but he doesn't have self-awareness because he's not metacognitive. And we haven't talked about feelings once, I don't think, in this entire discussion that video that he's uploaded, which just shows how far off base like the focus is, even if kind of like the direction of analytic idealism is correct. The focus is so far off. But this is why sentient singularity theory is called sentient singularity theory, because the name matters. It dictates your focus. It should be the distillation of what the theory is asserting. This is why I hate the name idealism. It's because it just means like ideas exist and that maybe that they're fundamental or more fundamental. But they always exist within a mind. So like, why wouldn't you call it mentalism or mindism or conscious agent theory or theism, something that isn't just like focusing on the idea aspect of it. Ideas are not much more fundamental than matter, guys. In fact, they're basically the same thing, just viewed from a different perspective. This is, like I said, the name matters a lot. It's not just something that, I'm going to pick my name and you're going to pick your name. And I hope that my theory beats your theory. And like, this is just my stamp. Sentient singularity theory is not a signature. It's not my signature on this theory. It is a distillation of the assertions, the core assertions of the theory. It's not something that is I don't even want to say it's my idea so much. It's like, meaning I just don't want to take credit for it. I just deduced it. It should not be something that you came up with and you like the name of. It should be something that is logically like the best description that is as concise as possible that you can get of the core assertions of the theory that you're proposing. And it should dictate the focus. And when you're talking about a being, you're talking about a structure / process. You're not talking about just and more than that really, but like a being is, it's being, it's an active, it's kind of an acting structure. That's why it's kind of being, ing is like a verb, but like skating, running. But then to be is like a structure. It's like to exist. To exist and in a dynamic fashion is a being. To exist dynamically. A dynamic existence is like kind of, if you distilled the definition of being, it's like dynamic existence, which really, like dynamic fundamental existence, which really is sentience. But sentient singularity is all sentient beings are singular in structure and unified within a singular, initial and eternal and total, singular sentient being. And you are someone. And each cell that you have in your body is someone, and God is someone. That's why it's singularity. It's not just a play on physics. Very important. The name is very, very, very important. It has to be coherent with the rest of your models and the rest of your descriptions and assertions and like other aspects of the theory. It can't just be, quantum gravity theory, but really it has nothing to do with gravity. It has to be, quantum gravity theory has to be about the quantization of gravity. but sentient singularity theory has to be about the singularness of sentience, and has to be about sentience and about the singular structure of them, of it. So analytic idealism is a bad, it's not a bad name, but it's not fundamental enough of a name to just to actually be the name of a theory that is the fundamental theory, the most fundamental theory. I'm not even saying that sentient singularity theory is the most fundamental theory. It's the most fundamental one so far, and I think it's the most fundamental, but maybe somebody else will prove me wrong. But analytic idealism, it's like saying logically analyzing and logical understanding and model of idealism, which is that ideas exist more fundamentally than matter, and that consciousness is fundamental, really. But we're not going to include that in the name. It's just not as good as it could be. That's all I'm saying. Even though I respect it. But there's value in understanding the someone that had to choose every single partition of the sentience from the oneness of God's sentience. Every single partition in sentient singularity theory, every single one had to be a conscious choice. Every single one. Every single increasing of multiplicity is a stroke swimming upstream. It's a choice. And there's value in that. There's value in your sense of your understanding of your own value, in your own meaning, because you're born meaningful, because God put you here, chose to put you here. Like, think about logically, if it was inevitable that God chose to put you here, create you, does that matter? Should that matter? It should definitely matter. Whereas analytic idealism, God doesn't make any choices. He just does what he does, and he has no goal. And so you are here without any meaning, just like in the mainstream materialistic, physicalistic narrative that is our current scientific mainstream narrative. There's no difference morally. It's the same. There's no difference in what impact it has on you morally or meaningfully, or in your emotions about your own existence. No difference between analytic idealism and physicalism. None. Because it's the same thing. It's just from a different perspective. It's a little bit more fundamental, but it's not quite. It's got a little bit more context. It's a little bit more fundamental, but it's not really there. And you have to get there. You have to get all the way there, because that the most fundamental structure, which really is the most fundamental being, gives context to everything else and everyone else. There's a big difference between knowing logically and that God chose to make me. Not just people, me. And all versus God didn't choose to make me. I'm just an inevitable process, process and result of the process of change in the universe. Which more fundamental you get on that, the less coherent it becomes. But choice must be included as part of the of causation. In sentient singularity theory, there's two what I call the components of causality. They are choice and determinism, which just means like logic. I hit this and then logically that has to happen. I push this and logically, I don't know, like I open my hand and this water bottle drops. Choice, causality. They are code-defining too, or codependent, I would say, not code-defining, but codependent at least. They're not mutually exclusive or or what's the term? Not competitive or they're not incompatible. They are not just compatible, they are dependent concepts. So there's a huge difference actually in analytic idealism and sentient singularity theory on a fundamental level. There's sentient singularity theory is also much more defined on what structures are sentient and what structures are not, at least proposed to be, because we can't ever know the sentience of another, so it's all a proposal. But at least there is a proposal of what structures are sentient, and in a way that maintains sentience throughout, a coherent chain of sentience throughout the entirety of the cosmological process. But in analytic idealism, he's assuming that there is no life prior to what we currently define as life, and you'll see that here. But he says we can't know what it's like to be God. I think you can kind of know some things about what it's like to be God, but you can't know everything about what it's like to be God. You can know that God was alone and meaningless and could not end his own existence even if he wanted to, and probably bored out of his mind. Probably. That's he was alone. Definitely true. He was meaningless. Definitely true. He's not able to end his own existence. I think definitely true. But, or I'm assuming it's definitely true. Was he bored? I'm assuming that's true, but I don't know. The experience of eternity is not it's not really long time. It's kind of like this weird intersection of, it's almost like instantaneousness because there's no time. So, but was he bored? Probably. But it's like, that doesn't mean bored for a long time. It just means bored because he's not doing nothing is happening. He's not doing anything. There's nothing, else to know, because he already knows that he exists and he's all that exists. So, what else is there to know? All the emotions that we have, probably God has. So when he says, I don't want to, make equate the universal consciousness to define God, I don't even know I don't like using the word divine even. The words divine, natural, these don't give context for most people today. Maybe to some people they do. I'm sure they do to some people, but they're not universally contextualizing. There is a description that we can be aiming for that matters much more than a term. Let's go to the chat. Please hit the like button if you find this valuable. We're going to try and wrap it up pretty soon here. A really important aspect of my theory is that will and feelings are two sides of sentience. They are like the masculine and feminine sides of married and soul. I totally agree with that, R. Wappin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Actually, I don't even know if I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know what that means. But it sounds obscene. I don't think it is, but that's giving you the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Will and feelings are two sides of sentience. Will is the desire to do. It's the ability to have a goal, and make choices about what your goals really should be. Is what free will is. It's not freedom to make make any choice that you could want to make in any situation. It's the ability to choose your goal, and that's freedom of will. And a lot of us, we think that we're exercising, like when we can trick ourselves into feeling like we're thinking when we say things like, I want to work out, but why don't I work out every day? I really want to work out. It's like, no, you want to work out. That's not the same as wanting to work out. And so if you really wanted to work out, you would. Not necessarily every day, but you would be working out. You wouldn't be like, why am I not working out? You'd be like, oh, I missed a day. But if you're just, you get a day and then you skip 7 days and you do one more, and you're like, gosh, I just can't be consistent about it. I really want to work out. It's like, no, you probably want to work out, but you don't really want to work out, which is the predicament that I'm in a lot of times lately. So this is, you have to ask yourself then, what is really your goal? Is it to work out? Not most days. It's not. Um, so in Sentient Singularity Theory, God has a goal. God chooses every single partition of sentience within his oneness. And it's not even, I'm not even going to touch on whether or not he's metacognitive right now because it doesn't matter. He's self-aware because he's feeling. Everyone is self-aware because they feel, not because they are able to think about their thoughts. Humans are metacognitive. We can create tools to create tools because we are metacognitive. We have this abstraction ability that's above other animals. And the reason for that is because we have the ability to implement it, like to speak it. We have the vocal cords necessary, the mouth structure necessary, and the social structure necessary to create the need and the context, to create the context in which you could create language, which is what allows you to speak abstract structure into existence. To communicate abstraction is what complex language allows for. It allows for the communication of abstraction. Opposable thumbs, free hands, walking upright, living on land where we can build fire and stuff like that. This is what allows for the construction of the abstraction. And if you can't construct the abstract and you can't communicate the abstract, then there's no reason to conceive of the abstract. So can dolphins, do they have the ability to abstractly comprehend to the same level that we do? No, they don't. They're probably not any different than an ant. That doesn't mean they're not more intelligent, but in terms of just like their ability to kind of I don't know, figure out what I don't know. I don't even know how true that is. You ever seen it? Like ants have figured out how to break into my bedroom every single time that they've tried, and I keep trying to keep them out. They're crawling in through my the baseboards in the house that I'm living in, and only at night. And then you wake up and you see like some trail of ants. I don't know if you've heard the story yet, but I've told it on here. But every night, my wife and I, side tangent, would go to sleep. We'd wake up and there'd be a pile of dead ants behind the dresser in my bedroom. No living ants within sight, just a pile of dead ants. So confusing. And I vacuum them up, and then we go to sleep the next night and wake up and there'd be a pile of dead ants, no living ants in sight. And I was so confused for weeks. And then one day I woke up at 3 a.m. to go use the bathroom, and I turned on the light and I saw a trail of live ants carrying their dead behind our dresser from underneath the baseboard from outside of our house and leaving them in a pile. And then during the day, they would all leave. They would literally turn my bedroom into an ant graveyard. So I sealed up the baseboard, which is like, caulk. And then I saw a few of them coming out of a different part the other day. It's like that they are intelligent enough to accomplish what they need to. So to even say, oh, what's more intelligent, a dolphin or an ant? It's like, I don't think that's if you contextualize it within the context of a test. But if you contextualize it within the context of their goals, which one is more intelligent? They're both as intelligent as they need to be most of the time. That's how intelligent they are. And their natural true goals are the true test, much truer of a test, much more relevant and consequential and meaningful of a test than just a kind of a test like an IQ test, like on paper. Your real IQ test is, can you accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? Not can you score a 150 on the test that Mensa gives you. You know, that's not important. So I don't even know how much I like in sentient singularity theory. We're not looking for artificial spectrums or non-fundamental spectrums. Goals are what contextualize everything in sentient singularity theory, or at least actions. They contextualize actions within sentient singularity theory. So it doesn't make sense to say in sentient singularity theory a dolphin is more intelligent than an ant. Now, intelligence is defined as the ability to problem solve to accomplish a goal, but it's also like the ability to set the right goal. Like if you set the wrong goal and you're accomplishing that goal, but it's the wrong one, that's not intelligent. Imagine if an ant's goal was to take food outside from the inside the nest, outside of the nest, instead of from outside the nest and into the nest. It's like it's accomplishing its goal, but it's the wrong goal. So it's the ability to kind of know the right goal and accomplish it. Kind of a fundamental definition of intelligence, not a IQ 150, 200, 180, this kind of artificial definition of intelligence. But God is spontaneous without goals. You have no logic left in the universe if that's the case. Two components of causality: choice and determinism. You get rid of choice, you get rid of everything. You get rid of determinism, you get rid of everything. You can see that the limits of analytic idealism's models, which is not, this isn't to rip on it, I'm just saying, like, just explaining where we differ.
The cosmic radiation background even shows where the quantum fluctuations happen that gave birth to stars, planets, galaxies, galaxy clusters, and so on and so forth, out of the initially uniform field of energy that arose immediately after the Big Bang. So I take the Big Bang very seriously. And some people might then say, well, if you take it seriously, Bernardo, then there was a universe prior to the rise of life. Life arose on this planet, the Earth, about 4 billion years ago. And we used to think 3.5. I think the latest is 4 billion years ago. And the Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. So what was the universe before life? Because according to analytic idealism, the physical universe is a cognitive representation of living beings. If there is no living being to cognitively represent the universe, then there is no physical universe, because physicality is the representation. Physicality is the dashboard. If there is no airplane flying around the sky, there is no dashboard. But that doesn't mean that there is no sky. The sky exists whether there is an airplane measuring it and showing the measurements on the dashboard or not. So the universe existence, whatever it is in and of itself, has existed before life, before an organism arose that would represent it on its own dashboard. But the universe is not physical. Physicality is a representation of the universe. So before life, there was no such representation, but the universe was there. Whatever transpersonal mental processes corresponded to the universe before the rise of life, they were there. There was mentation in the mind of nature before life arose. And we model that early mentation along the lines of what we call Big Bang theory. So the Big Bang is something roughly similar to it, roughly similar to a rapid expansion. Colloquially, I could even say an explosion, although that's not quite accurate, but something like an explosion happened in the mind of nature. I believe so. I believe so from a conceptual perspective. We can get in a level deeper where I might tell you that this is just a convenient theory, but I'm not going there in this course. As far as convenient theories are concerned,
He's right.
It's a very, very convenient one, an almost inescapable one. And it's entirely reconcilable with analytic idealism. There was mentation in the mind of nature before life arose. And if there would have been life looking at it back then, that life would have seen it as something more or less like an explosion. There was no life. Nobody saw it that way. But that doesn't mean that the sky wasn't there before airplanes started flying. Something happened 13.8 billion years ago.
So analytic idealism doesn't have a definition of life then, because it's using the definition that currently exists. And I don't think that this is a good definition. It's not useful at all. You could say cellular life. That's fine. Okay. That makes sense. That's contextualizing. But in sentient singularity theory, we try and understand existence first by understanding our existence firsthand. What does it mean for me to be alive? It means like that's to be life is that which is life is that which is alive. What does it mean for me to be alive? It means for me to be embodied and sentient, embodied in the change space and sentient. But even you could just say sentient. And it's funny because like even heaven isn't, when you're in heaven in the theological tradition, you're not beyond life. You're in an afterlife. It's not after you're alive. It's after, it's like an afterlife, meaning like it's life, but it's after this one. It's not the state that you're in after you are alive. Now you could define it one way or the other, but you got to pick one. It can mean embodied in the change space and sentient, or it can mean sentient, because that I know that I am alive because I am. If I am, then I am, and that's all that I really need to say. I don't care, to say I am alive. You can that can the only way in which you even need to add that qualifier of alive is if you're defining it as embodied within the change space of basically the meaning like embodied within the impact space, the space in which you can impact and interact with other beings besides God. And but then if you're just meaning sentience always existed. There is no prior to life if it's defined as sentient. And if it's defined as embodied in the change space or the interaction space or the impact space, sentient embodiment in the impact space, that is still like there are hadrons that were created at the beginning of the creation of the cosmos, essentially. Or you could say there's the sentient universe is created. You have sentient existence, God partitions his sentience to the initial creation, which is, you could say, the sentient universe, or what I call the cosmos, sentient cosmos, you could say. And then there's the initial creation within that being, by that being within itself, and that is a proton is the initial created being. And until then, like there is no physicality is not perceived. Physicality is a perception. It doesn't exist. It is a perception. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's like, but if you mean to exist beyond perception, there's nothing that exists beyond perception. Even sentience does not exist beyond perception, because God, as the initial sentience, even prior to any kind of ability for anyone to even to perceive physicality, God is perceiving himself. He is his own concrete constraint, is his existence. Like I said, he cannot end his own existence if he wanted to. He can't just think himself out of existence. He is his own physical constraint, yes, you could say, almost. And so there is, like, it's just not, it doesn't make sense to think about this. But the reason why he's thinking about this, Bernardo, is because he's trapped by the fact that there isn't a periodicity of sentience that analytic idealism proposes, which is in sentient singularity theory, this structure. It's this hadron, which is an assembly of quarks, which are like the fingers of the universe. They're not sentient. And then an atom, an assembly of hadrons, molecule, assembly of atoms, cell, assembly of molecules, organism, assembly of cells, family, assembly of organisms, caste, assembly of families, technological singularity, assembly of castes, and then it repeats within itself. And here's that. This is a formal proposal of a periodicity of sentience that is not existent in analytic idealism. And his definition of life is he doesn't have a definition, just like current scientific narrative doesn't have a definition of life. They're like, oh, metabolizes, and right now we're defining cells as sentient, but like we don't say cells as the definition of sentience. We say, it metabolizes, it perceives, it reacts, it responds, whatever, it maneuvers, and it's just this ever-changing list of perceivable descriptors. But really, you need to understand life by looking at a first-hand perspective. It is defined by sentience, at least initially, and no matter if it is sentience embodied in the impact space, the change space, or whether it's just sentience in general. However you want to define it, it's still defined initially by sentience, by looking from a first-hand, looking at it firsthand in your own self. Because we know we're sentient. Like we don't know if anyone else is sentient. We can't look to them to perceive the properties of sentience, because we can't even prove that anyone else is sentient, or falsify if anyone else is sentient. We can't not know that we are sentient. We know we are sentient. It's the truest thing that we know. So we have to look at a structure that we know is a sentient structure in order to perceive this properties of sentience. And we also need to look at it in a way that transcends and is beyond the limitations of space-time, because sentience is beyond space-time. So you have to look inward. You cannot look anywhere else. There's nowhere else that you can look to really understand and truly perceive the properties of sentience. Then you can look outward after mapping that internally, and then see if you can, confirm it in certain instances of, where you predict you would see it externally. But and then you can say, well, okay, because of this and this and this and this, I think that hadrons and atoms and molecules and cells and organisms and families and castes and the AGI internet, when it wakes up, Skynet would be sentient. And obviously, organism in this model does not mean anything that we call an organism now. A plant is not included as a sentient structure in Sentient Singularity Theory, at least most of them. But most animals, yes. But we can't know. We have to guess. But you can make there's a logical way of mapping it out that you can improve the likelihood that you're accurate. But part of that is also understanding what you're looking for by looking inward first, and then knowing what to look for outside, to try and determine whether or not a structure is sentient. But you need so much context, but it starts with understanding the properties of sentience by looking inward first. Then you have to think of the cosmological context and the logical, constraints of oneness and things like that, and to give added context. But when you add those two things together, then you can kind of create this type of model. Which, by the way, this is like a universe fully actualized, and it is within this one. But you can't model that in a two-dimensional model in Excel. You can actually create models of creation that are calculative. You can say, you can deduce what are the mathematical, I guess you could say, or the quantitative constraints of creation. You don't have to look at galaxies and think about 13.8 billion years ago. Sentient Singularity Theory started with these four primary perspectives that are code-defining and simultaneous in their perception. Inside means separate and oneness. Outside means separate from oneness. Oneness is inside and outside of separateness, and separate is inside or outside of oneness. They're co-perceived, co-defining, co-dependent. These allow for the perception and orientation of multiplicity beyond relativity. So they allow you to escape relativistic thinking. If you're sitting there and you're like, well, something happened 13.8 billion years ago, you are stuck in relativity. We're trying to figure out what is the structure of existence and the nature of existence beyond time, beyond space, not in time and in space. Beyond time and beyond space. So his definition of life is not the same as mine. But it doesn't seem to have a definition. It's not formal, at least. It seems to be whatever is the current scientific definition. And again, this is just according to this video. He does say things in this video that is like, we're not going to get into, what did he say? Like how the Big Bang is just a convenient model, and it's really like a model of conception viewed from within, the mind of the being that is conceiving it. But if you're a sentient thought in that mind, then you're going to perceive of like this explosion type of information. We can get into that, and he's not wrong. So there's more to his theory than he's saying in this one video. But there are certain things about this that he states in this video that are critical and not really open to misinterpretation. It seems like God makes no choices. And that God does what he does because it's what he does. And I don't even think that that's wrong. That's not the right thing to focus on when you're trying to describe God, though. You got to say, does God make choices? And he says God has no goal. He says no plan, I think is what he said, which means no goal. That not open to misinterpretation. And that is, if God does exist and God has a goal, that goal is contextualizing of the entire cosmos. So it's not a little thing that you're just nitpicking. No, that's the context of the cosmos. That's the context of evolution. Not just evolution, cellular evolution and adaptation. I mean like cosmological evolution. This is, his just metaphor of like physicality is just the dashboard. It doesn't actually give you any extra information to think that. It just kind of breaks you out of the current paradigm, but you have to give people something else. But you don't even have to do that. You can just say you are a mind inside a mind, and the thoughts of the mind that you're within are because that mind is the world that you navigate and you inhabit. You're going to perceive that as your world, because that being is higher than you in kind of like the power hierarchy, just like you are higher than your cells because they're within you, at least in any single cell. You can't just think the ideas of that mind that you're within out of existence. You just can't, because of just the logic of coherence, of information coherence. There's a greater coherence or causal chain that is coherent causal chain that's of the mind that you're within. You're just in that chain a little bit. You're like in one link of that chain. You don't just get to will it all away. But there are things about this. It's like if you don't get that, the fundamental core things, it doesn't matter how close you get, you'll never get close enough to describing existence in a relevant and meaningful and true enough way. What does it matter? What is the value of analytic idealism? Personally, at least, none. It doesn't give you any meaning. So he can say, I'm actually comforted by the fact that like God can't make choices, because otherwise he would be really sadistic. No, you are not taking responsibility for your own choices and, for the choices of other people that are allowed by God, because otherwise there's no meaning. Choice is the definer of multiplicity. If I can't make any choices, then I don't exist. if I can't choose my goals, at least, then I don't exist. You have your goals and I have my goals. But if my goals overrode if every time I had a goal, it automatically was your goal and you had no choice in that, you wouldn't exist. You would just be like my arm, but you wouldn't be someone different from me, which means I can't impact you anymore. You're just my arm, which means there's no meaning. Multiplicity of will is multiplicity of sentience, and it is the context of meaning. There's no meaningful theory outside that, whether it's idealism or materialism. I think that's it, guys. Let me see. How did I stumble across this video without clicking on any video or searching anything like this? I don't know. Maybe it's divine intervention. Fate, destiny, coincidence, synchronicity, God's will. God's existence cannot be ended. Maybe that's why he made the world, so he could rest. Partially, but also just so he could matter. You know? But I do think he rested because he has other people working now. You know, he creates the sentient universe within him. Then that sentient universe creates others within it. And God can just kind of let things, you know, he can take a break. It's like hiring a manager. You're the CEO, you hire, you know, management below you to handle things. It's kind of like that. But you create a manager. Instead of getting them from outside of you, you just create another one within you. Because you got God who is always awake, and then the rest, where you can sleep. Exactly. The mind, I'll call it synchronicity because I don't believe in coincidence. Yeah, there's no such thing as meaningless coincidence that's just there's no such thing as true randomness. There's the perception of randomness, which just really means you don't have all the information. Or at least enough information, I will say. You'll never have all the information, but you don't have enough information. The mind, I was talking about getting closer to God and developing a higher level of consciousness, or even reach a different level of enlightenment. Don't try to become enlightened. There is no, to be enlightened is to recognize that there is someone who's wiser than you, who purposely created you, who has a goal and a plan, and who has a will that's separate from yours, and who you are within, and you know, recognizing that you'd want to align yourself with that being. That's enlightenment. There's no higher enlightenment. And that's relevant to you or me. It's in Sentient Singularity Theory, there's self-awareness, which just comes from feeling. And then there's context awareness, which is awareness of the construct that in which the sentience or the self-awareness is embodied or created. And that construct that self-awareness is within is also self-aware. And there's a quantity that this structurally adds to, which is fascinating, which is, you know, we're not going to get into it, but like in my models, you can see exactly what quantities are created, and literally created. Like there's a modeling, obviously, but this is a model of self-awareness, and it starts with one, but it's basically adding and multiplying this one way and adding the other way while maintaining symmetry. And so you get, it's just generation. It's information generation to a point where you get a self-reflection. So, which is when this is calculated, all of these numbers. It's interesting though, 33 is calculated just like, it's a 3x3 matrix that is calculating, and then information, and then the end product is 33, which really is also 3 by 3. So it's like, imagine thinking about yourself. It's like you have this little picture of yourself within your mind. It's like this is a 3 by 3 structure, and this is a 3 by 3 structure being calculated by this structure. It's fascinating. And you're starting with 1, so like you can't start with 2. Like, yeah, it'll calculate, but really you have to start with 1 because you're starting with 1 bit of information. What's interesting, though, is that if this is self-awareness, if this is like the value, the quantity that represents self-awareness to some degree, if you add this to the count of the construct that created the self-awareness, or that the self-awareness was created within, you get the answer to life, the universe, and everything, which is fascinating. And no, that's not something I try to do. That would be ridiculous. But it is funny. What's really funny is when in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they ask Deep Thought, the AGI, the technological sentience supercomputer, what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything? And it eventually tells them 42. Somebody asked the writer of that story, where'd you get that number? And he said, I tried to think of a funny number. But it's also like very like relevant number in theological traditions, and I think there's even like unique mathematical qualities about it. And it's some kind of like the highest number that is triadic in structure or something. I don't remember the video that I watched about it, but it was on like 1 red, 2 blue, 2 brown, 1 blue or something. That math channel, I think, had a video about it. It might not have been that one, but let me see. Actually, look it up. 42 number. Yeah, number file 42. And then, why is 42 a cool number?
So first of all, I feel that we owe it to your listeners to say why 42.
Sure.
So of course, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy came up with 42 as basically a random number. Just, the author just pulled it out of a hat, and he's admitted so. He said, well, 42 just seems like just random numbers any.
Random.
But in fact, there's many numbers that are linked to 42. So 42, again, just to summarize, is the answer that this super mega computer that had computed for 1 million years with the most powerful computer in the world had come up with. At some point, the computer says, I have an answer. And they're like, what? It's like, you're not going to like it. As I was turning 42, I basically sort of researched why 42 is such a cool number. And it turns out that, and I put together this little passage that was explaining to all those guests to my 42nd birthday party why we were talking about the meaning of life. And basically talked about how 42 is the angle at which light reflects off of water to create a rainbow. And it's so beautiful because the rainbow is basically the combination of sort of it's
fascinating
because the sun just came up. It's a very beautiful number there. So 42 is also the sum of all rows and columns of a magic cube that contains all consecutive integers starting at 1. So basically, if you take all integers between 1 and however many vertices there are, the sum is always 42. 42 is the only number left under 100 for which the equation of x to the cube plus y to the cube plus z to the cube.
That's what I was talking about.
And was not known to not have a solution. And now it's the only one that actually has a solution. 42 is also 10, 10, 10 in binary. Again, the yin and the yang, the good and the evil, 1 and 0, the balance of the force. 42 is the number of chromosomes for the giant panda. The giant panda. I know it's totally random.
That's hilarious.
It's a auspicious symbol of great strength, coupled with peace, friendship, gentle temperament, harmony, balance, and friendship, whose black and white colors again symbolize yin and yang. The reason why it's the symbol for China is exactly the strength, but yet peace, and so on and so forth. So 42 chromosomes. It takes light 10 to the minus 42 seconds to cross the diameter of a proton, connecting the 2 fundamental dimensions of space and time. 42 is the number of times a piece of paper should be folded to reach beyond the moon. So, which is what I assume my students mean when they ask that their paper reaches for the stars. I just tell them just fold it a bunch of times. 42 is the number of Messier object 42, which is Orion. And that's, one of the most famous galaxies. It's, I think, also the place where we can actually see the center of our galaxy. 42 is the numeric representation of the star symbol in ASCII. Which is very useful when searching for the stars, and also a regex for life, the universe, and everything. So star. In Egyptian mythology, the goddess Ma'at, which was personifying truth and justice, would ask 42 questions to every dying person, and those answering successfully would become stars, continue to give life and fuel universal growth. In Judaic tradition, God is ascribed a 42-lettered name and trusted only to the middle-aged, pious, meek, free from bad temper, sober, and not insistent on his rights.
In Judaism, also the Torah has 42 rows of in a kosher Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. There's 42 rows in the kosher structured one. Also, by the way, the number of generations between, I believe, Adam and Jesus. If you read the genealogy of Jesus, it's like in the beginning of the New Testament, it's like 14 generations between, Adam and Abraham, and 14, I think, between Abraham and someone else, and 14 between David and Jesus, something like that. It's like 3 sets of 14. So it's 42 generations to Jesus. It's a fascinating number.
And in Christian tradition, there's 42 generations from Abraham, Isaac, that we talked about, the story of Isaac, Jacob, eventually Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. In Kabbalistic tradition, Eloka, which is 42, is the number with which God creates the universe, starting with 25, letter B, and ending with 17, good. So 25 plus, 17. There's a 42 chapter sutra, which is the first Indian religious scripture, which was translated to Chinese, thus introducing Buddhism to China from India. The 42-line Bible was the first printed book marking the age of printing in the 1450s and the dissemination of knowledge, eventually leading to the Enlightenment.
Guys, the Torah, which is the Bible, the beginning of the Bible, has had 42 rows in it since forever. A kosher Torah has always had 42 rows. It didn't start there.
Which is called a single-cell eukaryote, and the subject of my PhD research has exactly 42 million proteins. Anyway, so there's
you're on fire with this. These are really good. So I guess what you're saying is just a random number.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, it's just a random number. There's no such thing as randomness. I'm not saying I understand all the relevancy of every quantity, and I don't, and you shouldn't try, and don't freak out about numbers. Some people spiral about numbers, but there are certain numbers that show up exactly where you would expect. And it's probably just due to the context of that quantity in a generative context. Because you got God, who's always awake. Okay, I was talking about getting closer to God. I have to try and understand you as if like a child, and you have to live through probably thousands of deaths to at least, I don't know, live like me. But I don't understand many things. Who am I? I don't know. Some drunk cat. I came up with my name, and when I was a teenager, and I stuck with it. I literally doesn't mean anything. Oh, you're R-Wappin? Okay, fair enough. Anyone in Texas, Professor Scott Aronson will be leading my Polymath, Salon, and Computational Complexity Philosophy of Mind and Computation, and much more. Tyler's joining too. Yes, that's true. Look at the Ekkolapto channel, which is linked below, when he has the video of my Sentient Singularity Theory intro lecture, and he's going to have an event in Austin, Texas, and I will be attending. I'm looking forward to it. So will Scott Aronson. If anybody is more interested in more information on that, they can private message me on Instagram, and I will send them Addie's way. That 42 degrees is the angle of light that makes a rainbow is fascinating to me. Oh, it's so fascinating. I didn't know that. But anyways, it's a beautiful thing. I have to call it. I'm trying to be good, guys. I am. So I don't want to go too late, but I really appreciate everybody. Please hit the like button if you found this meaningful. I really respect Bernardo Kastrup. I just want to say that. Not trying to diss on him or anything like that. I'm not ripping on his work. It's extremely valuable. There is no ability to even start just giving the context of sentient singularity theory without these other theories that are already out there, like analytic idealism and conscious agent theory and, many others. So, link to the full talk is below. I always recommend, studying Bernardo's work yourself. Don't just take me as an expert. I'm not. If you want to know more, the link below will send you to his YouTube channel. With that, everybody, thank you. Please hit the like button again. Peace.